Today, we're diving into a really powerful, and yeah, some would say pretty controversial new way of thinking about law enforcement. It's called precision policing, and it makes the case that the future of keeping us all safe might actually be found in lessons learned on the modern battlefield.
So, where are we getting all this from? Well, our guide for this explainer is the book Precision Policing by Josh Luberis. And it makes a really bold claim that the very same methods the U.S. military developed to cut down on civilian casualties in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, those can be adapted to make American streets safer for everybody, both citizens and police officers.
And this one question from the book's preface, man, it just hits you. It really sets the whole stage. It was asked by a former Navy SEAL who became a SWAT officer after a high-risk raid on an empty house went horribly wrong. And that question right there, it frames the entire problem that precision policing is trying to solve. So that question from the SWAT officer, it gets right to the heart of a problem the book calls the high-risk paradox. It's this idea that the very tactics police have been using for decades, the ones designed to keep officers safe, are actually one of the main reasons we see so many preventable tragedies. And the scale of this is, well, it's just staggering. The use of these high-risk warrants has absolutely exploded. The book notes a 2,500% increase over 4 decades, even while violent crime was going down. So you have these 80,000 operations every year, right? They're less than 0.1% of all police activity, but they cause a hugely outsized amount of harm. And here's where that paradox really snaps into focus. In the effort to control every little variable with just overwhelming force, critical mistakes, like hitting the wrong address, happen way too often. According to the book, we're talking over 1,000 times a year that a tactical team smashes into the wrong home, often with just devastating results. You know, beyond the unbelievable human cost, there is a staggering financial one. We're talking nearly $2 billion in a single year. That's for lawsuits, settlements, and all the other costs that come from these operations. The book basically argues we literally cannot afford to keep getting this so wrong. So this brings us right to the core of it all, the paradox. The textbook tactics of speed, surprise, and violence of action, which are all about protecting officers, end up creating these chaotic, split-second situations where terrible things happen. This is the central problem the book is trying to fix. The book uses the tragic case of Breonna Taylor to show that this paradox isn't about just one mistake, but a total system failure of intelligence. Every single one of these factors was a point where better information, better planning could have changed the entire outcome, maybe preventing the raid from ever happening. It's just a devastating example of this paradox in action. Okay, so if the old way is broken, where do we find a new one? Well, the book's central idea is that the answer comes from a place you might not expect, the U.S. military's own, very painful, evolution away from tactics of overwhelming force, what we used to call shock and awe, and towards something much more surgical and precise. Now, the book draws a direct and, pretty surprising parallel here. It argues that the military in Iraq and police departments here at home are facing remarkably similar problems. How do you operate effectively in a really complex environment while protecting innocent people and keeping their trust? The military learned the hard way that just using overwhelming force was creating more enemies than it was defeating. So this kind of shows the military's journey as the book lays it out. At first, they had the fancy tech, the precision weapons, but no real strategy to go with it. Then, through really tough experience in Iraq and Afghanistan, they forged a whole new doctrine, and the result, a 90% drop in civilian casualties. The book's point is that the key wasn't just better weapons, it was a better way of thinking. And central to this whole new way of thinking is a concept called pattern of life analysis. So instead of just looking for a threat, you study the normal rhythm of a place or person. You know, when do the kids go to school? When are people usually home? What does a normal Tuesday even look like? That way, anything that's out of the ordinary really stands out, and it lets you take precise, smart action. All right, so all this sounds interesting in theory, but what does it actually look like for a police department on the ground? Well, the book lays out a toolkit for adapting these military methods for police work, and it really stresses that it all has to be done within the bounds of the Constitution. And this slide shows that it's not a direct copy and paste job, but more of a translation. So intelligence preparation of the battlefield becomes intelligence preparation of the operation. A red team, which is a military team designed to poke holes in a plan, becomes an adversarial planning review. See? The whole focus shifts from brute force to achieving a specific goal with the least amount of harm possible.
And according to the book, this isn't some futuristic sci-fi stuff. The tech is already here, and it's what makes this whole precision model accessible. Drones can give you eyes in the sky in real time. AI can spot patterns a human might miss. Data platforms can pull all this information together. The argument is that the tools for a smarter, safer way of doing things, they aren't just for the military anymore. They're available, and they're affordable.
And this is probably the single most important point the book makes, over and over again. This is not about giving police tanks and fighter jets. It's about giving them the planning discipline, the intelligence analysis, and the risk assessment methods that the military developed to make their own operations safer and way more effective. It's about professionalization, not militarization. And, the book offers up some pretty compelling real-world data to back this all up. It points to places like Camden County, New Jersey, which have started using some of these principles. The results are, well, they're dramatic. Huge reductions in injuries and casualties, and they completely eliminated wrong door raids. This is shown as proof that, hey, this concept can actually work.
So, what does this all add up to? What's the big takeaway? The book presents precision policing not as some magic wand, but as a credible, evidence-based way forward in what's become a really polarized debate about the future of policing in America.
And that's really the core of the argument here. It's framed as a third way. For people demanding reform, it offers a huge reduction in the use of force and these awful preventable tragedies. And for people focused on public safety, it offers more effective, intelligence-driven policing that actually gets results.
There's this quote from a composite character in the book that I think just perfectly captures the huge shift in mindset we're talking about. It's all about redefining what success even means. It's no longer about speed and force. It's about safety and professionalism. It's a move away from a warrior mentality to what the book calls a precision operator. And this brings us to the final, really provocative question the book leaves us with. It's the central tension of the whole idea, isn't it? Is it possible to take a set of principles that were forged in the fire of counterinsurgency and adapt them to strengthen, not threaten, a democratic society? The book argues that yes, it is. But that right there is the question we're all left to think about.